Hi friends, thanks for joining me today. We are trimming a hat again. Let's get started. Get started is the wrong phrase because I'm already 16 hours into this project. That is because I completely forgot it was something that I should be filming. So here we are. This project has a story. So probably 3 years ago or so, there was a vendor at the Virginia Renaissance Fair who took those cheap knit hats. I'm not sure they're actual knit, if I'm being honest, but those cheap witch hats and turned them into mushrooms. And they were really adorable, a little pricey. And when I say a little pricey, I don't mean too expensive for handmade art. I just mean out of my budget. But yeah, they were really pretty, and some of them had lights and some of them did not. And she had a whole bunch of colors, and I didn't buy one because it was not in the budget for that year. And we went back the next year and I liked them a lot, and I couldn't decide on what color I really wanted. I didn't really want to spend the money on it. Again, not too much for the art. I understand how much art costs. I just didn't really want to spend that much money, especially for a craft that I felt like I could do myself, because I can do a lot of things myself. But a lot of times it's just easier to pay somebody to do that, right? Last year, when we were on our way to the Virginia Renaissance Fair, I thought, if that mushroom hat vendor is there, I'm going to buy a hat this year. They were there. And I did not buy a hat. This would be last year's trip to VARF. Once again, I couldn't decide on what color I wanted. Do I want lights or no lights? I really can make this myself. Can I justify spending the money when I know that the base hat is really cheap and I probably have the stuff to just do it myself? So I did not buy one. Fast forward to our trip this year. Knowing full well that I had not made my own hat, I said openly in the car to my family and friends who were going with us, if that hat vendor is there this year, I am going to buy a hat. I'm going to buy a purple hat with lights. I had made my decision in the car. Actually, I probably hadn't at that point, but as the drive went on, I made my decision. It's like, it's probably going to be a purple one. Purple's my favorite color. So that was not an easy choice, but there it was. I made a choice. I was not going to be paralyzed by my options. I was going to buy one of those hats because obviously I had not actually made one. They were not there this year. So I was kind of sad. I had really kind of had my heart set on a mushroom witch hat, which means I have no idea the name of the artist. These particular hats, they're not on Etsy. I've kind of looked around. Maybe now it's also possible that this particular vendor will be there later in the season and not the full length of the season, but we were only going opening day, so it is what it is. Well, now, because I really want my mushroom hat, we're gonna make a mushroom hat. I bought 2 bases. I bought this pretty sage green one. I still need to steam it. It's a little crushed from its shipping journey. And I bought this purple one. Now I already have one of these hats. I bought a black one, 10 years ago when we were all getting these cheap hats from Wish. I bought one. But that's that's my winter witch hat. So I don't need that to look like a mushroom. So these are gonna turn into mushrooms. Well, actually I've changed my plan. This one's gonna turn into a mushroom hat. And this one is going to turn into a forest hat, like, little mossy bits and then mushrooms growing out of it, that kind of thing. And I think I can do that with needle felting, so it'll still be nice and light. And that's because I'm 16 hours into the purple hat project and I absolutely do not want to do this again. Now, part of that is my choices, and I'm going to talk you through that. I chose to hand sew this. I did find a tutorial on Joanne's website. I will link that below if I can find it again. And that was making a hat outright and trimming it like a mushroom. So I just kind of used some general ideas. There was one part of it that I did not think was entirely clear, so I just kind of winged it. So I did buy, this is the progress, this is where we are with the hat currently. I did buy, ooh, not that way, that way, fairy lights that I have sewn onto the brim. I've made a little pocket in here. See if you can get in there and see that, to hold the battery pack so I can pull it out and change the batteries when I need to. This way, that way. Now the artist at Varf probably has a whole system, and there's probably a good deal of glue involved. And I decided I was going to sew this and not hot glue it, because I really hate hot glue. So I've tacked the lights on at a few places to kind of keep it in place. So then I was looking at, I have this really cool purple shimmery, let's see if I can get some darker colors back there so you can kind of see, organza fabric. And I thought, well, that would be really cool for the gills on the underside. I cut 2 strips of this because this is also, I'm gonna cut some circles out of this and then put the spots on the outside in the same shimmery organza. It frays like crazy, so I'm not entirely sure that's a wise move, but that's where we are. The instructions on Joanne's website say to cut a long strip, much like this, a long strip, and sew the short ends together. And then you gather the inside really tightly and then gather the outside not quite so much and attach that to your hat. I tried to attach the organza strip directly to my hat and it wasn't quite working. So I decided to make a hat band, an inner, like a sweatband on the inside of the hat, and attach the organza to that. So here is the progress. We are 1/4 of finishing the outside gill part. So here is the band, and this will be sewn to the inside of my hat. And then I have the organza fabric that is gonna cover the lights, and then this will be on the outside and there'll be like a little line of lace there. So let's see if we can kind of visualize. When I get it all together, this purple part will be sewn on the inside, this little lacy bit will be on the outside, and then you'll see the lights through the organza on the inside. I think it'll be cute. I think I measured correctly. It might be a little tight. It might have to be finagled here and there, but this is the part that I'm running with, so it is what it is. And you can kind of see, like, here's my needle. This is where we are with sewing the outside band to the lace. But it just felt like it would be easier to sew down if I've got all of the gathering stitches in place, and then I've got something really solid to sew to the hat itself. That's where we are with this particular hat. So I'm gonna do some more sewing on this. It's pretty much, as far as the underside, the part that looks like the gills of the mushroom, it's pretty much once this part is done, then, and I just have to attach to the hat and it's mostly done. Then I want to do the circles on it. And this is, I don't know what has just possessed me to put this on my head, but here we are. There's my hat. I've had a long morning. There was a team building event at my work this morning, and now that I'm home, I want to try really hard to get this done. There's a string here, there's a gathering string. You can't really see it on my camera. It's a gathering string for gathering up the organza, but I do think this method is working, assuming that my measurements are correct. That's a pretty big assumption, but I think it'll work this way. So we're gonna sew some more on that. I'm gonna try really hard. I'd like to finish this next weekend. There is a local Renaissance festival, kind of local, mostly local. The last year was their first year, and this year it's at a beer garden, somewhat nearby, not really nearby, like an hour away. Last year was their first year, and this year they're doing 2 days of the weekend. My mother-in-law went last year, but we did not go. But I want to go this year. I'm having so much fun going to these fairs and stuff, so I would really like to finish this hat for that. Maybe. And yeah, so that's the project. We're gonna finish sewing. So that's where I am. Gathered the organza here and I'm sewing it down to the lace here, and then the entire thing, at this point it's gonna go, flip it inside out this way. So the hat will go here, and then we'll sew this to the inside of the hat. But I've got to finish gathering the edge, and half of it is done. So like here's the halfway point on one side, here's the halfway point on the other side. Half of it is gathered and half of that part is sewn. This has been taking so long. I was not anticipating it to take so long. I say I've worked 16 hours on this. It's been primarily this thing. And also the sewing of the lights down onto the hat took a crazy amount of time. So we're going to try to finish trimming the purple hat, and then we're gonna start on the green hat. And yeah, I think I can do all of that with wool roving. I'm not sure if this is actual wool. Like almost all of the listings say this is wool and knit, but I really don't know what that is. I guess it could be. I'm not a super experienced knitter, so I don't know if it feels far more stiff than I expect knit fabric to feel, but it definitely has some looks of knit. It of course was not handmade. It was machine made, if anything. But then there are there's some really interesting lines on the inside. I'm not really sure how these hats are constructed, but it doesn't matter. And whether or not it's actual wool, I don't know that either, but I feel like I can still felt something through this. I also think I could put a backing of like wool felt, like just a piece of commercial wool felt on the underside and felt through that, and that will do the same thing. So that's where we are. Let's get some work on this hat. I'm probably not going to finish it today, but I've got hopes. So friends, it's been a few days, an entire weekend included in that few days, and probably close to 40 hours of work. I'm almost done. I have one more spot that I want to put on the outside, but I want to show you what we have so far. So this is like the gills on the underside, and then I've got some spots on the outside, and the lights. The lights work and shine underneath the organza I used as the gill fabric. I am super happy with how this came out. I have a pin over here because that's where I'm going to put my last spot. So I do have some thoughts. And my thoughts are, if you want to do this with a ready-made hat like one of these, sew your spots on first, because when I'm sewing onto the brim like this one, I don't want to sew through the gill fabric that I used underneath. So it's actually kind of rough. It's hard to sew through this fabric as it is. It's very thick. It's doable, but it just takes a lot of extra work. So let me talk about the spots. My initial plan was to just take 2 bits of organza, cut a circle, sew around, turn it inside out, press it, and sew that onto the hat. And the reason I decided not to do that is because when turning the organza, you would see the raw edges inside, and I didn't think that was gonna look exactly the way I wanted it to. So what I ended up doing is cutting a circle out of the cotton fabric. So this fabric is almost the purple of my hat, and it's the same fabric that I used on the inside sweatband. So I cut a circle out of this, and I cut some of the organza fabric and sew this around like a fabric yo-yo, kind of. Doesn't exactly work on the organza, and then put that down onto the hat. All of these raw edges would be underneath, and sew that on. And that actually worked really well. I really like how these spots look. It's very cool. I'm super happy with this. Despite how long it has taken me, I ran into a few problems. After sewing the organza here to the lace, it was ever so slightly too tight. I could stretch the lace a bit, and I think that's the tightness was the tension of my stitches, not that I didn't measure correctly. And I could stretch those stitches out a little bit to get this part here where the seam is to the edge of the hat. But then because this hat wire isn't super strong, it just was like collapsing in on itself, which I didn't want. So what I ended up doing, as you can see, is I sewed along the edge, basically halfway through the lace instead of at the edge of the lace. And I really, really like how this turns out. So the kind of gill part underneath looks really neat. And then there's a little bit of peekaboo from the lace on the outside. It's so cute. So I'm super, super happy with this project. It definitely would go faster if you wanted to do something like this if you used glue. There's a bit of satisfaction in hand sewing and in sewing half of this and having to pull it out and refigure how it was going to fit. That was a little frustrating. I hate pulling out hand stitches. Yes, it definitely would have been made easier by glue. I also considered, instead of sewing a yo-yo out of the organza, to just glue that down. I could not find any of my fabric glue. I have no idea where it is. I know I have a ton of it. I've got different brands. None of it is in my glue box. I don't know where it went. So I ended up just sewing that. I did use some fray check on the ends, on the edges of these little circles, which also gives my stitches kind of something to anchor to when I sew it onto the hat too. So that worked out really well, and I'm very happy with this. So I'm gonna call this done. Ooh, I'm shaking the table. I'm gonna call this done. I'm gonna finish my last little mushroom spot. Here is my hat on my head. It's so fun. I'm just so happy. I don't know, I'm really happy with how it worked out. Next time I will do, and by next time I don't necessarily mean next video, because I did have a goal of finishing this project by Saturday. It is now Tuesday. I'm gonna finish it today. It's gonna be done, yay. I don't have a particular event for the woodland hat, but I will start working on it eventually. So my idea for that one, The listing for these hats say that they're wool, and I'm not sure. I'm honestly not sure if it's wool, and I don't feel like burning it to try to find out. It's probably not, but who knows. But I think I should be able to felt through that. I might have said this at the beginning. I don't remember. It was last week. So I want to plan where I'm going to put the little mossy bits and where I'm going to put the little shelf mushrooms, and there's going to be some little mushrooms over here, and I think it's going to be really fun. But I want to do some thinking about that before I actually start felting, like start needle felting into the hat. But yeah, that's my project. This was really fun. It did take a very long time. It took a lot of hours of working and hand sewing and getting through this really thick material, and my hands hurt, and I poked a couple holes in my leather thimble. It was an adventure, but I'm really happy with it, and I'm excited to wear it to our little festival on Saturday. So there we are. One more mushroom spot. So this witch hat will have a total of 9 spots on it. I did that on purpose. That's it. That's what I have. I'm done. Green hat, next. Not necessarily next time, but next. Green hat. Thanks so much for joining me today. I am grateful for you, and I'll see you next time. Bye.